waving away, Lord, Lord.
You know, it's almost tougher to write in one of those parades than it is to narrate it because once in a while you're off camera because the parade is 2 or 3 hours. And, you know, you've got a lot of fans, and so you try to smile.
Oh, yes.
And I want to tell you, after 3 hours, I rode in the Santa Claus Lane Parade in Hollywood once, which they have around Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And it's about 3 hours long. And by the time you get done, you are locked
so
like
true.
this. And for
That
2
is-
days, you're walking around saying, I got a terrible headache. But you can't. You got this stupid grin on your face.
That's so true. You know, I rode as Grand Marshal the St. Paul's Winter Carnival.
I've been there.
Yeah. And
Talk about cold.
Talk about cold. I got on the horse around 3:30 in the afternoon when the parade starts, and I had a big bush jacket on and hat and gloves and the whole thing, and I even had little batteries in the gloves to keep you. And around half an hour later, the temperature dropped from 17 above to about 18 below. Mm-hmm. And there I was riding away, and I'd forgotten one thing. When I was a kid living in Canada, this part of my middle finger, my left hand, always got frozen if I wasn't careful. I guess I got bad circulatory thing there. And it started to freeze during the parade. And there I was riding around, and I had to keep it warm somehow, so I remembered the only thing to do.
There's the Grand Marshal in the parade.
You know what?
The distinguished actor.
Mm-hmm. You know what the people of St. Paul are thinking.
Mm-hmm.
All those years.
Nunny,
Yum, 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 yum.
Oh, it gets cold up there. But the electric things are not bad. We used to go to the giant football games, and it gets very cold up in Yankee Stadium. And I bought a pair of electric socks. Have you ever seen those?
Oh, yes.
Oh, that's true.
Yes.
It's a little battery.
Don't step in a puddle.
Oh, no. You glow a lot.
Your eyes light up.
If you can keep your feet warm, it's great. And nobody could figure out how we look so good. And we had these wires running down the trousers legs into the socks, and it is the greatest thing in the world. They sound silly, but if your feet are warm, your finger doesn't freeze for some reason. I know, it's an old adage. If your feet are warm, you don't have to go around looking like this.
No.
No, not me. No. You've had this question many times since, you know, it's a funny thing. I announced one night on the monologue in California that some of the shows were not going to be on next season, and I mentioned Bonanza, and there was such an lousy reaction from the audience. They didn't want it, you know. They said, oh, no, they hadn't heard it, that it was going off the air. It was 14 years now?
14 years, yeah.
And everybody, I suppose, has asked you how you feel after 14 years. It has been any show that runs more than 2 or 3 or 4 years on television is remarkable, but 14 years for a series of that nature it's incredible.
Well, it's we were very fortunate. Actually, I remember when we first went on the air, we were bad. I mean, it was not a good show.
Right.
It really wasn't. Because nobody really knew what the show was about yet.
And you hadn't developed any, I suppose, rapport with the other members of the cast.
Exactly. In a television show, you do a Broadway show, Jimmy. You know, you have your rehearsals, 4 or 5 weeks rehearsal. Then you go out on the road and you get all the kinks out of it. Then after 13 weeks, you open on Broadway, right? Mm-hmm. Well, when you do a television show, the first day of rehearsal is on the air. Yeah. You don't even know who you're playing yet.
Because you have a deadline and you open and that's it.
You know, you get the script that morning and you say, oh, that's the character I'm playing. And and it's almost just that. So the first 13 weeks we were pretty bad. As a matter of fact, we were canceled. After the 6th show,
I remember.
We were canceled, and that's 14 years ago. And somebody said, well, all right, we'll do a 7th one, and do an 8th one, and then did 13, and then we did 26 and 34, and finally we've done close to 500.
That's remarkable.
And they finally canceled us.
Well, you had a great run.
But it was a marvelous run. You build up a marvelous rapport and a very warm feeling toward the people that you've worked with. Not only the stars, but the crew, all the technicians. And we had a marvelous wake last week. We did. We all got together, and we all wept copious tears, and we all imbibed, Ed. Yes. I think that's it. And it's on your diet, so I knew it was all right. And we had a marvelous time talking about the things that had happened over the 14 years. And we got all the emotion out of our system.
It is an emotional relationship. Yeah. But that is a remarkable feat in itself.
It's sort of a mixed blessing. Of course, I thought that they were going to cancel the show when Dan Blocker passed away last May. And I'm surprised when it continued on because Dan was such a strong, powerful part of that show. Right. He added so much to it, and a marvelous actor, marvelous human being.
Yes, he was.
But
You ever thought of doing another series? That's another question you've been asked. If somebody came and said, would you like to try another?
yes, I think so. If the right part came along and the right property.
Right.
I remember when I was asked about Bonanza, about doing a series years ago by the man who finally got me into Bonanza. And we were at a social thing, and he said, would you be interested in a television series? And I said, oh, sure, 3 conditions. He said, what? He said, well, I said, a successful series, a starring role, and a lot of money.
Not
And I
bad.
thought if you're going to ask for something, ask for the moon. And that did turn out to be Bonanza, you see.
But in more ways than one.
In
huh?
more ways than one.
You opened a can of worms on this show the last time you were with us in California. You started talking about acupuncture. Yeah. And I want to tell you, we received more mail from people because you could not on television mention the name of the doctor that you went to. You had mentioned that you'd had some back problems. You went and took this acupuncture treatment, and for whatever, medically or whether it's psychologically, it worked.
Yes, it
and there have been many, many cases where, in fact, right now in New York, there's a court case going on because there was an acupuncture clinic operating here in New York, and they closed it up.
Right.
Because they said it apparently was not being performed, as I understand it, by people with medical degrees or something. And yet all the people who were going there attested, in many cases, to almost, I hate to use that word miraculous when you talk about medicine, but in a way, miraculous things that had happened to them. And they couldn't see why the state of New York would close this up if it was working, in fact.
Right. Well, I think they allow acupuncture to be practiced if the man who's practicing it has a medical degree in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
How many acupuncturists do you know in the United States who got a medical degree in the United States?
I don't know any of them. We tried, after the show, I said we should try to do a show on this. Well, we ran into a great deal of red tape and difficulty in trying to get someone on the show who was qualified. We checked with all the universities in California, and they say, yes, well, we can discuss it. But you must have a medical degree in the state in which you do it, and there are very few. But people are still, I guess, trying to find that kind of relief.
We had, I had a remarkable experience. I said, my goodness, a lot of people watching the Johnny Carson show, because we had a tremendous number of phone calls from Canada, the United States, and from some parts of Mexico. And people, but I don't mean 1 or 2 phone calls, like 30, 40, 50 long-distance calls a day for weeks on end, and an average of about 500 to 600 letters per day. My agent, they couldn't get hold of me, so people would call the Screen Actors Guild, and they would give them my agent's telephone number. And my poor agent just closed shop for a week and a half.
Calls?
Yeah.
Well, now, Lauren, if you thought now Bonanza is over,
Open
you
up
want
an
to get into
acupuncture
something,
clinic?
you could go into the acupuncture business from those calls alone. Would you recommend, now this may be too general a question, but would you seriously recommend to somebody if they had some problem and where they couldn't find relief, say by a doctor, to try acupuncture, or does it depend
I know some
basically
doctors.
on the
I know some doctors who go to an acupuncture man, and they get relief from it. I know one doctor who had very bad back conditions. As a matter of fact, he found difficulty moving around and walking, and he went to the same acupuncture man that I went to, and got relief. You see,
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Did you read? I believe it was Anamafo, was it not? Who was either in Time or Newsweek, and had the similar thing that you did, where she could not practically move. Went to an acupuncturist, inserted the needles wherever and whatever he did. And he says, "Get up off the table." And she said, "You've got to be kidding." He said, "Get up and walk around." She says, "I got up, walked around the room with no pain, and has had no problem since."
Yeah.
Now that can't be all psychological.
No.
I just don't believe that.
Of
There's
course
got to
it's
be.
not. I think that in time, the medical
come to
profession-
recognize
No,
it.
that's it.
We'll take a break. We'll be right back. We had calls.
Miguel, call Mayflower.
Well, I, for one, along with millions of others, will be up to watch you tomorrow. the Thanksgiving Day Parade from Macy's, because it is great. And also, I want to wish you the best of luck. You are also the national chairman of the Multiple Sclerosis Society Association for this coming year, I understand.
Yes. And multiple sclerosis is a strange disease. You know Lou Unser, the
Right.
Bobby Unser and Al Unser, the great race car
Right.
drivers. Well, Lou designs all their cars. And he came down with multiple sclerosis, Marvelous,
Well,
but
it's the research they have to do.
tremendous research.
Thank you, Lauren. A pleasure again being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. Thank you, Jimmy. Tomorrow night we have Billy Wolf, Gunilla Knudsen, and from Pippin, Ben Barron, and John Rubinstein.